Hey guys, so if you're in the fan-related groups on Facebook, Ceiling Fan Kids being the main one that I'm a part of, as well as iHeart Fans, you might have caught some of this discussion on there. It started as a conversation about some new administrators for the iHeart Fans group, and it made me think of some of the trolls we have had among fan collectors over the years. And I wanted to see who, besides myself, remembered Smiley and remembered Johnny Running Bear and his fan reservation. And I'm trying to remember who else were the earliest, fake accounts that were specifically among fan collectors. I've been involved in fan-related forums online since the 90s. I think the first fan-related forum I joined was fancollectors.org, the American Fan Collectors Association's forum, which has changed many times over the years, and it's very different now. But nobody there wanted to discuss ceiling fans, and they still don't, really. That hasn't changed. But, fancollectors.org was the first one, and then we discovered something called Ceiling Fan Depot that was some Lamps Plus or Lamp Depot or someplace like that had started a webpage to sell ceiling fans, had created a forum just as an offshoot of the webpage. And I don't know if they ever had intended for anything to happen with it. But that's where I met the first round of ceiling fan collectors. I met Adam DeBauer on there. I met Pierce Phillips. No, I think I already knew him. Brian Hicks. I'm pretty sure that's where I met Brian Hicks. And Perry Zambrana, Matt Cody. I might have already known Matt Cody. I can't even remember who was all there on there, but that's where I met the first round of fan collectors. And it was a completely unmoderated board. It's the old type of web board where everything was in threads and everything was on a web page and you have to scroll all the way to the bottom. That kind of thing doesn't really happen anymore, although it's kind of similar to what happens on Facebook. Eventually it got overrun with spam, and Adam DeBauer created his first forums, which was very different than the one he has now. And then later he created the one that he has now, and then we later created a Yahoo group, and we had a Vintage Ceiling Fans, I think it was called, Yahoo group. And then at some point the Dangerous Tacos Vintage Ceiling Fans forum opened up to compete with Adam's Vintage Ceiling Fans, because the one thing that was missing from Adam's was tacos, apparently. Then at some point everybody transitioned over to Facebook, and there was the original Ceiling Fan group on Facebook, and then that branched off into now there's a specific kids group and iHeart Fans, and there's a million groups on Facebook. And you know, I've been a part of all of them, but there have always been what in the internet world is known as trolls, which are people that post stuff just to provoke, and often do it under a pseudonym. And the earliest ones that I remember, the earliest trolls I remember that were specific to ceiling fans, were Smiley and Johnny Running Bear, and I wanted to see if anybody else remembered them, and I could remember any others from those days and those boards. Like I said, on Ceiling Fan Depot, there was no moderation, so the trolls basically ran wild. We did not get a lot of them on the Yahoo group. Adam's site, I was the primary moderator for years, and I was pretty good about shutting anything down right away. But we definitely had some collectors that did some trolling under their own name. Again, Pierce Phillips and Perry Zambrana come to mind. But for the most part, I don't remember any actual, internet trolls from that site. And you don't get a whole lot of them on Facebook. YouTube has created a new generation of that. Obviously, the most famous being Jonah Musto, who I believe is the same person as Jonathan Armstrong, although I don't follow all that. And whoever he is has a million pseudonyms and is, etc. And then there's there's definitely some people that troll my YouTube comments. I can't think of their account names offhand, and there's a fake Spiffy account and a bunch of other stuff. So, trolling is still a thing among fan collectors. But it's definitely become a lot more mundane for the most part. For the most part, it's just people that, try to create insults and commentary and stuff like that. And, it's just part of using the internet these days. Although, definitely can turn harmful, as a lot of you guys know with some of the Musto stuff and everything else like that. That ended up with him being reported to his ISP and everything. Anyhow. I'm just curious if anybody else has any memories from those days. It's something that I've been thinking about today as I was in those conversations, and I've been driving on the road, so I've had some time to kind of reminisce and think back and remember. I'm also trying to remember who were like the first fan collectors that I met online. I remember that I knew Pierce Phillips and Matt Cody even before all of like the different online forums. I used to mail pictures back and forth with Pierce Phillips, and Matt Cody actually came to visit me a few times, and we used to mail fans back and forth as well. What else? Jay Bernard I've known since we were kids, and I'm pretty sure we met during the AFCA as being, two of the few guys that were into Ceiling fans. I think he's a little bit younger than me, but not by much. So is Pierce. I remember that was like the first round of collectors that I met included those guys. And then the next round of collectors that I met, was Adam, Brian Hicks, Perry, and I can't remember who was in that round, and like the round of collectors that that eventually came over to VintageCeilingFans.com when it was first created. It used to be called something else. And then from there was a new generation of collectors that popped up in no particular order, because I don't remember the order. Cole, I remember when Cole first joined. John Pernock, he used to post as a kid, and I used to think that he was like a troll or a scammer too, because his posts didn't make sense. And then eventually he got older, and I'm like, oh, this guy is for real. He's not, And who else? I don't remember when Zachary came into the picture, but I remember when Brian and Sean... Well, Sean's one of them. I remember when Sean joined VintageCeilingFans.com, and, he was the young guy. He was the new young guy, and myself and a lot of the older guys, older being probably in our 20s at the time, if that, probably, but he was a kid, and the rest of us were adults, and we were trying to, take him under our wing and whatever, and he ended up stiffing a lot of us. And so then him and Brian Hicks split off to create the Dangerous Tacos Vintage Ceiling Fans. And I remember, for the longest, I was banned from the DT site before I'd even set foot there, just because Sean didn't like me. And if you typed my name in over there, it replaced it with a curse word. And then at some point, they unbanned me, and I stuck my head over there to see what was going on. And I'm like, who's this Zachary guy? Because there was a Zachary guy that I'd never heard of that appeared to be like a big wig among the, new generation of fan collectors. But I'd never heard of him before. And so I remember when he, I don't remember when he came into the picture, but I remember when I first found out that he existed. And then, who else? I'm trying to think of who was next, because then, years later, it wasn't until years later that the Mark Castros and the Daniel Groundwaters and them, and then when Mark first joined the DT site, I thought he was, I didn't understand him either, because his posts didn't make a lot of sense at first either. I think what happens is a lot of times people are so excited to learn that there's other people that are into fans, and they just get excited. But yeah, I'm trying to remember who was in the earliest generations of fan collectors. There was a guy named Ryan Sipka who used to collect fans but did not really interact with anybody online, and him and I used to talk every so often until he stiffed me on a deal, and then I stopped talking to him, or he stopped talking to me. I don't know. I mean, neither of us have called each other since then, but he was in the very early generation of collectors too, but he didn't really count because he didn't really post online. And Chris Held, I remember Chris Held. He's kind of got back involved these days, but he was out of the game for a while. He is another person that I met early on in fan collecting. And, yeah, so I'm just trying to think about who some of these OG vintage fan collectors were, who the OG, internet fan trolls were. I'm just trying to play out the whole timeline in my head because it's been a long time. I mean, who would have thought, when we started looking online for this in the 90s, the internet was a new thing, fan collecting was a new thing, even to the antiques guys, they had just recently formed the AFCA, and started AFCA websites, so it was even pretty new to those guys as well, although a lot of them had known each other for years. But in terms of it actually being a formal organization with a website, it was fairly new in the 90s as well. Even being a formal organization without a website, because websites were new, It's just kind of crazy to think how everything has evolved. Because, when I first started posting online, everybody had dial-up, and nobody had computers in their home unless you, were really well off or really technologically on the cutting edge. So you had to go to the public library. And the public library had a computer you could use for 30 minutes a day. You could sign up to use it if you had a library card. And if there was nobody after you, you could stay on it for another 30 minutes. And at some point, the public schools got the internet. And I'm trying to remember. I don't think I ever used the school computers to do fan stuff, either because I was worried about getting in trouble, or we didn't have enough time, or I don't know. But it wasn't right away. School always had computers, but for the longest, they were just there for word processing and educational games. I mean, they didn't even always have computers. Heck, when I was in elementary school, I remember when we got computers. So it's just, kind of amazing how all of this has progressed. And I am definitely in, the first internet generation of fan collectors. I am, I'm one of the oldest, one of the first to be, in a generation of collectors that met online and, bought fans online. I remember when eBay first, I'm not going to say came out, but when eBay first became, a thing that people had heard of. The first fan that I found on eBay, I didn't win it, was a Tatung, it looked like a Caribbean Breeze, but it had 4 wood blades and a little nut in the center. It was new in box. And this was back when there wasn't such thing as an eBay account. You just used your email address to bid. So everybody knew, if you were bidding on eBay, everybody knew who you were, because there was no masked account name, And so if you had a question for the seller, eBay account was right there, And so and then if you won it, there was no PayPal. You sent a check in the mail, and then they eventually would send the item, and it would take weeks, And that was the first fan I found on eBay, was that Tatung new in box spinner. But I didn't win it. I think I bid $9.99, which was the opening bid, and somebody else bid, $10.50 or whatever. And what I used to do is I used to email anybody who won a vintage fan on eBay and say, hey, are you a fan collector? And that's how I met a lot of fan collectors. That's how I met Mark of Excellence, a.k.a. Mark Wilson. Because, again, this was back when eBay didn't mask your email address. So you wanted to email somebody on eBay, all you had to do was click their email address on eBay, and then you'd open an email window to them, not even through the eBay messaging system, but an actual legitimate email. And I'm trying to remember who I met through eBay. Mark Wilson is the one that comes to mind, but I remember I also met Perry through eBay separately. Didn't realize it was the same guy that was on VintageCeilingFans.com, because he was using his mom's eBay account, and she was just talking about how she was just being so supportive of her son. And Perry was an adult, or so we thought, so, who knows. But, stuff goes way back. Trying to remember, definitely everybody used to be friends with Adrian Parado before we learned that he was a scammer. And I'm trying to remember, I think I met him, I think he joined VintageCeilingFans.com. I think he was one of the first few rounds of collectors there. And, wow, this is some stuff to think about. This is a lot of memories. I remember. Now, here's something to look at. You ever want to go on VintageCeilingFans.com and look for something cool. I had a thread called I Seek This Fan. And on that thread was a description of a fan that I didn't know what it was called, but later turned out to be the Terra. And I posted a sketch of it, and so there was an early sketch of a Terra and a description. And a bunch of people, including John Wood, who I think I originally met through VintageSealingFans.com, now that we bring him into the conversation. I think John Wood and Adrian Parado and a few others were like, that's a Terra fan. And so that's when I discovered what at the time was my favorite childhood fan, still one of my favorite childhood fans, was. Because I had no clue. I just had remembered this fan from I had a lot of childhood fans, and as a child they were all equal, but then I started to find some of them as a collector. And so the ones that became more important were the ones that I never found or never saw again. And that's how those rose up the list, you know? Because like a Newtone Veranda Deluxe and a Terra used to be equal to me. But as I started to find more and more Veranda Deluxes, then they became less interesting than the Terra. And the thing that made the Terra so coveted for me is that I not only did I never find one, I never saw one again. I didn't see one installed anywhere. I didn't see one in pictures on the internet. I didn't see one on eBay. Like, no Terras of no kind turned up anywhere. And so it was one of those things where I'm like, did this even exist in the first place? You know? And there haven't been too many fans like that for me. The iFan, it would be like that if I didn't actually have, like, you know, the one that's in the museum, and now there's two in the museum, but we still don't know who made it, so that's kind of like that. And then there's still a fan that, I'll do a separate video describing one of my childhood fans that I still haven't figured out what it is, because I thought it was so interesting. So, I'll do a separate video for that. This video is going on pretty long anyhow. So thanks if you're still sticking with me, listening to all these old stories about fan collectors.